Part 3. Unwritten Pages. Jackson begins finding excuses to spend time with Amelia away from the library, introducing her to quiet pleasures she's denied herself. A private dinner at an empty restaurant, walks along the river at dawn, a visit to his art collection. When Amelia panics during a moment of physical closeness, Jackson steps back immediately with understanding rather than judgment. Later that evening, Amelia confesses that past trauma has left her unable to bear being touched, explaining that she's never experienced real intimacy as an adult. Rather than retreating, Jackson shows compassion and patience. Their emotional connection deepens as they begin sharing a level of honesty neither has experienced before. Part 4. Binding Threads. When tabloids publish photos of Jackson with Amelia, creating wild speculation about their relationship, both their worlds are disrupted. Jackson's business rivals use the relationship to question his stability, while Amelia faces unwanted attention and gossip at the university. Frightened by the exposure, Amelia withdraws, convinced their connection was always impossible. Jackson respects her space but leaves letters for her at the library, sharing his thoughts and feelings without demands. Meanwhile, Amelia begins working with a therapist to address her trauma, realizing that her fear of connection has become its own prison. When she discovers Jackson has created a literacy foundation inspired by their conversations, she recognizes the depth of his understanding. Part 5. Open Books. After weeks of separation, Amelia makes the decision to visit Jackson at his home. She finds him designing a private library space filled with first editions of the books they'd discussed. Without words, she takes his hand. The first time she has initiated contact, Jackson understands the significance of this simple gesture. Amelia explains that while she is still healing, she wants to move forward rather than remain trapped in her past. They agree to build something new together, slowly, patiently, and on their own terms. In the epilogue 1 year later, we see them together in the completed library. Amelia reading aloud as Jackson listens, their physical and emotional intimacy having developed naturally through mutual respect and understanding. Part 1. Silent. Echoes. Amelia Parker's footsteps echoed softly against the marble floors of Hawthorne University's West Wing Library. At 11:30 p.m., the massive building stood empty except for her and the leather-bound books that lined the walls like silent sentinels. She preferred it this way. The midnight quiet, the absence of people, the predictable order of ancient texts and catalogs. As the Special Collections Night Librarian, Amelia worked when others slept. Her domain was a world of first editions, historical manuscripts, and fragile documents that required specialized care. The university had hired her 5 years ago, impressed by her master's degree in library science and her meticulous attention to detail. What they didn't know was that she had chosen the position specifically for its solitude. Amelia checked her watch, still 30 minutes before she could begin her final rounds. She adjusted her glasses and returned to cataloging a recently donated collection of 18th century botanical illustrations. Her fingers moved carefully over the delicate pages, her touch professional and precise. At 28, Amelia had perfected the art of invisibility. Her clothes were simple and muted, her light brown hair always tied back in a practical knot. She spoke only when necessary and made herself forgettable by design. The sound of the main doors opening broke her concentration. Amelia frowned, glancing up from her work. The library was closed to students after 10, and the cleaning staff never arrived before 2 a.m. "Hello?" A deep voice called from the entrance hall. "Is anyone still here?" Amelia hesitated, then stood reluctantly. "In the East Reading Room," she responded, her voice quiet but clear. Footsteps approached, and a man appeared in the doorway. Amelia immediately registered several things: his height, well over 6 feet, his clothes, casual but expensively tailored, his presence commanding without effort. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair showing hints of premature silver at the temples and features that belonged on a Renaissance painting, rather than in her quiet library. "I apologize for the late intrusion," he said, his voice cultured but not pretentious. "I'm Jackson Reed. President Thornton told me the special collections would be accessible whenever I needed them. I hope that's correct." Amelia's breath caught slightly. Everyone at Hawthorne knew Jackson Reed, tech innovator, billionaire philanthropist, and the university's most generous living donor. His company, Axis Technologies, had revolutionized renewable energy storage systems, making him one of the wealthiest self-made men in the country. Of course. Mr. Reed, she replied, professional mask firmly in place. President Thornton informed us of your potential visit, though we expected you during regular hours. A slight smile crossed his face. I find night hours more productive. Fewer distractions. Amelia nodded in understanding. What materials will you need access to? The Whitmore papers, specifically his journals from 1878 to 1882. I believe they contain technical drawings related to early energy storage concepts. Amelia's eyebrows rose slightly. Most donors of Jackson's caliber sent assistants or researchers to do this kind of work. The Whitmore collection is kept in climate-controlled storage. I can retrieve it for you if you'd like to work in the main reading room. That would be perfect. Thank you, Miss, Parker. Amelia Parker. Thank you, Miss Parker. As Amelia led him to the appropriate room and went to retrieve the requested materials, she felt an unusual tension between her shoulder blades. Something about Jackson Reed made her acutely aware of herself in a way that was both unfamiliar and uncomfortable. She moved efficiently through the temperature-regulated storage rooms, locating the Whitmore boxes with practiced ease. When she returned with the materials, Jackson had already set up a laptop and notebook at one of the large oak tables. He looked up as she approached, his gray eyes catching the warm light of the reading lamps. These need to remain in this room, Amelia explained, setting down the acid-free boxes. Please use the provided gloves when handling the documents. No pens, food, or beverages near the materials. I'll be at the main desk if you need assistance. Jackson nodded, immediately reaching for the archival gloves. You seem very good at your job, Miss Parker. The simple observation caught her off guard. I enjoy preserving history, she replied carefully. Even at the expense of experiencing the present? He asked, a genuine curiosity in his tone rather than judgment. Amelia blinked, unsettled by the perceptiveness of his question. History doesn't demand anything from you except care, she answered finally. The present is more complicated. Something shifted in his expression. A flash of recognition, perhaps. A fair assessment, he said quietly. Amelia retreated to her desk but found herself glancing occasionally toward the reading room. Jackson worked with unexpected focus, handling the fragile journals with appropriate care. Unlike many wealthy patrons who treated the library as a photo opportunity or status symbol, he seemed genuinely engaged with the content. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then with increasing intensity. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the autumn storm that had been forecast for days finally arriving. Amelia checked the time again. 12:45 a.m. She should begin closing procedures soon, but she couldn't exactly ask Jackson Reed to leave. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Amelia frowned, opening her desk drawer to locate the emergency flashlight. Hawthorne's ancient electrical system was notoriously vulnerable during storms. As if summoned by her concern, the lights went out completely, plunging the library into darkness save for the occasional flash of lightning through the tall windows. The sudden silence of the ventilation system felt oppressive in the darkness. Ms. Parker? Jackson called from the reading room. One moment, she replied, clicking on the flashlight. She made her way carefully toward his voice, the beam creating strange shadows among the bookshelves. When she reached the reading room, she found Jackson had already closed the journals and returned them to their protective boxes. Does this happen often? He asked, seemingly unperturbed by the darkness. Occasionally during storms. The backup generator should activate for essential systems, but it doesn't cover all the lighting. I'm afraid the electronic locks on the main doors are also affected. We're locked in? There was a hint of amusement in his voice. Temporarily, Amelia confirmed. Maintenance will override the system once they're aware of the outage. But given the hour, it might be a while. Jackson finished for her. Amelia nodded, then realized he might not be able to see the gesture in the dim light. Yes. I apologize for the inconvenience. A flash of lightning illuminated his face, revealing an unexpected smile. No need to apologize. I've had worse evenings than being trapped in a library with centuries of knowledge and an expert guide. The compliment made Amelia uncomfortable. She wasn't accustomed to being noticed, much less appreciated. There are emergency lanterns in my office. They'll provide better light than this flashlight. She led the way back to her small office, where she retrieved 2 battery-powered lanterns from a cabinet. When she turned to hand one to Jackson, she found him examining the single personal item on her desk, a worn copy of The Secret Garden. Childhood favorite? He asked, accepting the paper walls. 3 weeks passed since the stormy night in the library. Jackson had returned several times, always during Amelia's late shift, his research becoming a convenient excuse for their growing conversations. Tonight, as she shelved books in the medieval history section, Jackson appeared with an unexpected request. "Hawthorne's annual benefactor gala is this Friday," he said, leaning against a bookshelf. "I'd like you to attend with me." Amelia nearly dropped the volume she was holding. "As your companion," he clarified. "Not as staff, not as a colleague. As my guest. I don't attend social functions," she said quietly. "I wouldn't know how to act." Jackson stepped closer, careful to maintain the distance she always seemed to need. "You know more about Hawthorne's history than anyone on campus. Besides, I find most of these events unbearable without genuine conversation." Amelia studied him, searching for ulterior motives but finding only sincerity. "People will talk. People always talk," he replied with a shrug. "The question is whether we let that stop us from living." Against her better judgment, Amelia agreed. The night of the gala, she arrived wearing a simple navy dress borrowed from her friend Daphne, who had helped style her hair in loose waves instead of her usual tight bun. When Jackson saw her, something in his expression made her heart flutter unexpectedly. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The gala was overwhelming. Too many people, too much noise, too many curious glances. When the pressure became unbearable, Amelia slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the campus gardens. Jackson found her there 15 minutes later. "Too much?" She nodded, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I'm not good with crowds." "Neither am I," he admitted, joining her at the railing. "I've just had more practice pretending." Something about the quiet night and his patient presence loosened Amelia's carefully constructed barriers. She found herself telling him about growing up in foster care, being shuttled between homes where she never belonged, finding refuge in libraries where books became her only consistent companions. "I learned early that people are unpredictable," she concluded. "Books aren't." Jackson listened without interruption, then shared his own story. Growing up with wealth but emotional neglect, building his company to prove his worth, achieving everything society valued yet feeling fundamentally disconnected. "Success is its own kind of isolation," he confessed. "Everyone wants something from you, but no one sees you." Amelia looked at him with new understanding. "I see you," she said softly. Unwritten pages, their connection deepened over the following weeks. Jackson found ways to introduce Amelia to experiences she'd denied herself. Private viewings at museums after hours, dinner in restaurants closed to the public, quiet concerts where they sat alone in the balcony. He never pushed for physical closeness, seeming to instinctively understand her boundaries. Yet one evening, as they walked along the river at sunset, his hand accidentally brushed against hers. Amelia froze, her breathing suddenly shallow. Jackson immediately stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said gently. Later, sitting in his car, Amelia stared at her trembling hands. "It's not you," she whispered. "It's me. I can't. I've never what?" Jackson asked softly. "Been touched," she admitted, the words barely audible. "Not in any way that mattered. Not in any way that didn't hurt." Understanding dawned in Jackson's eyes. "Amelia, after my last foster home, I promised myself no one would ever have that power over me again." She couldn't meet his eyes. "I know it's broken. I know I'm broken." "No," Jackson said firmly. "Not broken. Protecting yourself the only way you knew how. Most people wouldn't understand," she said. Jackson's voice was gentle when he replied, "I'm not most people." That night, Amelia realized that while Jackson had never touched her body, he had somehow touched something deeper, a part of herself she'd locked away long ago. The headline appeared on a Tuesday morning: "Tech billionaire and librarian. Unlikely romance or strategic move." Beneath it, grainy photos showed Amelia and Jackson leaving a restaurant, walking along the riverfront, standing close but never touching. Amelia's phone rang continuously. Colleagues, journalists, even distant acquaintances suddenly remembering her existence. The university president called to express concern about the library's reputation. When Jackson texted to check on her, Amelia responded with a simple message: "I can't do this." For days, she avoided his calls, changed her schedule at the library, and retreated into her familiar isolation. But each night she found a letter waiting at her desk. Jackson's thoughts, observations, and gentle reassurances without demands or expectations. "I understand withdrawal," he wrote in one. "I've perfected my own version of it. But I've never before found someone worth the risk of emerging." Meanwhile, Amelia began sessions with Dr. Winters, a trauma therapist. "Healing doesn't mean forcing yourself into discomfort," the doctor explained. "It means recognizing when the protective walls you built have become your prison." Weeks later, Amelia discovered that Jackson had established the Parker Literacy Foundation, creating libraries in underserved communities based on ideas they'd discussed during their night conversations. "He's not using you for publicity," Daphne observed. "He's listening to you." Open books in a snowy December evening, Amelia stood outside Jackson's home, gathering courage before pressing the intercom. His surprise was evident when he answered the door himself. "Amelia," he said softly, as if afraid speaking too loudly might make her disappear. "I needed to see you," she explained. He led her through his modernist house to a room she hadn't expected, a library under construction, with empty shelves waiting to be filled. "What is this?" she asked. "Something I've been working on," Jackson admitted. "First editions of every book we've ever discussed." Amelia walked slowly around the room, touching the shelves, recognizing the careful thought behind the design. "It's beautiful. It's not finished," he said. "Like us." She turned to face him, heart pounding. "I'm still healing," she said honestly. "I don't know how long it will take or if I'll ever be normal." "I've never been interested in normal," Jackson replied. "Only in real." Gathering all her courage, Amelia crossed the room and gently took his hand, the first time she had ever initiated contact between them. Jackson's fingers remained perfectly still, though she could feel his pulse quicken. "I want to try," she whispered. "Not because I should, but because I choose to." Jackson's eyes held hers, filled with a tenderness she'd never seen directed at her before. "We write our own story, Amelia, at whatever pace feels right." 1 year later, they sat together in the completed library, Amelia reading aloud from The Secret Garden while Jackson listened. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder, a small intimacy that had taken months to achieve. Between them lay not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. "Do you regret waiting?" she asked during a pause in reading. Jackson's fingers gently brushed her hair. "Some things are worth waiting for," he said simply. "Some people are worth the patience." Amelia closed the book, marking their place. Tomorrow they would continue the story, adding another page to the one they were writing together. Not a fairy tale, but something more valuable. A true one.